Usually when you hear the term Godzilla fan, you think of somebody that looks like this, or maybe even this. More often than not, you'd think of the word nerd, but what if I were to tell you that there is a much larger significance behind the infamous rubber suit than meets the eye? Chances are, if you've seen any spiky dinosaur that breathes fire, it's taken some level of inspiration from the Godzilla franchise. Just hear me out. Sure, you can look at basically all of these movies at face value and mock their dated use of practical effects, but there's a heart and dedication to the genre that runs deep in the creature's history. Godzilla is debatably one of the most recognizable pieces of pop culture in the world, with a record-breaking number of films that have remained relevant in the box office for over 60 years now. As of this writing, the Godzilla vs. Kong trailer uploaded by Warner Brothers is raking in over 70 million views, and for a film with next to zero marketing campaign, those are some pretty crazy numbers. But how did a rubber suit monster become such a well-known icon? First, I think we should take a short look at the monster's origins. Where did this rubber suit phenomenon originate from? Before they were known for making creature features, Toho Studios was making people like Akira Kurosawa famous with samurai flicks such as Seven Samurai, a 3.5-hour-long Japanese epic set during the war-torn 16th century of Japan. Time for your fun fact of the day. There's been a long-running myth that due to Seven Samurai being the most expensive Japanese film produced at the time, releasing the same year as Godzilla, Toho actually almost went bankrupt. However, with some googling around, this can easily be disproved, as Toho's financial status was already just fine, with 68 films being produced in 1954 alone, on top of them owning most of their own theaters. A mere 2 flops would not have sunk the company. The absence of any real substantial proof on the subject further proves the theory that it never happened at all, and the company had no serious financial issues at the time. Founded by Ichizo Kobayashi, Toho mostly made samurai and war dramas up until the Japanese got involved in World War II, where we saw more propaganda-filled films such as Sanshiro Sugata Part 2. Godzilla entered production at an incredibly fast pace after a Japanese-Indonesian co-production titled In the Shadow of Honor fell through. After hearing of the cancellation, Toho producer Tomoyuki Tanaka was tasked with making a different movie entirely. On his flight back to Japan, he read a news article on the Lucky Dragon 5 disaster, which was an event that took place on March 1st, 1954. 23 crew members of a tuna ship named something that I would definitely butcher in this video suffered from ARS, acute radiation syndrome, and even hepatitis after being contained by nuclear fallout from a United States Castle Bravo thermonuclear weapons test. Everyone exposed to the radiation survived aside from the boat's chief radio man, Kubuyama Aikichi. This, along with the bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, were ultimately the inspiration for the giant monster as we know him. Audiences in 1954 were not viewing this as the next summer action flick, rather something that hit incredibly close to home. Very few constructs exist that portray a particular era as well as this film does, a metaphor for a world gone up in flames. The monster had no bias and no particular system of belief. Even if you were held at the highest caliber of social status, you'd be nothing in the face of it. Gojira was the embodiment of the fear of nuclear annihilation, a fear that Japan had to endure on multiple occasions and something that had left a permanent scar on human history. The film has a surprisingly moving message regarding anti-nuclear warfare and the dangers that lie ahead if humanity continues down this destructive path.
ゴジラが最後の一匹だとは思えない。もし水爆実験が続けて行われるとしたら、あのゴジラの同類がまた世界のどこかへ現れてくるかもしれない。
What I love so much about the Showa era in particular is the unique level of craftsmanship, dedication, and borderline insanity that would eventually spawn into so many subgenres and genres of fiction that we could spend the next 8 hours diving down that rabbit hole and only scratch the surface. I mean, eventually Godzilla starts flying, and at that point most people have long since tuned out due to confusion. For example, Master special effects artist Eiji Tsuburaya had spent a pretty ridiculous amount of money on the miniature cityscapes used in the Godzilla films. Tsuburaya was a pioneer of the industry, co-creating the original Godzilla as well as being the main creator of the Ultraman franchise. Depending on which film you're watching, some of these miniatures begin to look like real cities. These sets, along with suits and other items thrown out in Left 4 Dead, would be repurposed, repackaged, and retooled to help the production of Ultraman in 1966, which at this point in time is a tokusatsu giant that has generated over $7 billion in merchandising revenue from 1966 to 1987 alone, making it the third third top-selling licensed character in the world at the time. Without that type of dedication and commitment to the genre, some of these movies and TV shows would not have even been made. While most people mock their use of such dated effects, I instead admire them. The work putting into making these films can knock a man out, and I mean that literally. Reportedly, suit actor Haru Nakajima would pass out inside the Godzilla suit and up to 2 cups of sweat would be poured out each time. I mean, Jesus Christ. 1962 would be the year that Godzilla went toe-to-toe with America's most infamous ape, King Kong, propelling the character once again to American audiences and planting the seeds for the franchise to be known worldwide. Remember that Tsuburaya fella? Rumor has it that he actually wound up eating one of the live octopuses used in the film. Talk about not letting your effects go to waste. What made this film in particular such a big deal for each property was the sheer amount of exposure that it received. It was the East versus the West, our monster against their own. Much like with 54, the Americanized version of the movie was re-edited and changed to hopefully better suit American audiences. To achieve this, screenwriters Paul Mason and Bruce Howard would insert and place new footage to give the impression that the film itself was a newscast. Ooh. A very different take for sure, but hey, I think it worked. They even used completely different music, such as tracks from The Creature from the Black Lagoon. Doing so would also simultaneously spark the infamous dual ending myth, where the Japanese and American endings were different, one in which Kong wins and the other having Godzilla win. This has been debunked time and time again and has been proven not to be true. At all. Stop believing it. This iconic battle has been cemented in film history, and it seems that moviegoers are still interested in these types of movies, as Godzilla vs. Kong has now neared $200 million in box office sales, and the film has only been out for a few days. Okay, that might have been a lot of information to take in, but how does this all eventually circle back to me? I have always been a fan of the use of practical effects in all genres of films, mostly horror. I appreciate art, and that's what these movies are to me. Growing up, seeing most of this stuff actually in front of the camera blew my mind and would inspire me to learn more about the filmmaking process, as well as learn just what goes into making such immaculate set pieces, suits, and all this other crazy shit we see in these movies. They may look stupid at times, but what I saw in the Godzilla films helped me appreciate the craft across the board. Take a look at the transformation scene from An American Werewolf in London. It's a standout scene by itself, but it's the kaiju and tokusatsu films that I grew up with that taught me how to look beyond the fantastical display on screen and see what goes on behind the scenes. The meticulous level of detail put into each shot was painstakingly done by hand rather than generated by a computer. Special effects legend Rick Baker did such an amazing job with the effects that it won the film the first ever Academy Award for Best Makeup. All of this achieved with the use of an incredible display of practical effects. The same type of effects that originated with series such as the Godzilla franchise. People like to see what's in front of the camera. In my opinion, you can attach yourself to the story more easily with something that's actually being shot rather than something that's being generated. The point of watching movies for most people is to feel that sense of escapism for around 90 minutes, to be pulled into another world and experience something alien. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand that applying that to a man in a rubber suit stomping on miniatures is pretty difficult, but it's no different than gawking at Tony Stark fighting a giant purple man in space. Is it really any less believable? You also have to remember that these films were a product of their time and were only capable of doing so much. CGI has only recently begun to look lifelike, yet most of these films were made before things such as the internet even existed. With that being said, the effects would only continue to get better and better aside from the occasional studio mishap or lack of budget. A man that I want to touch on before this video is over is Koichi Kawakita, the man responsible for the insanely cool set pieces and effects for the Heisei era of Godzilla films. This guy was a legend in Chad-maxing the Godzilla franchise, winning a Japanese Academy Award for his work on Godzilla vs. Ghidorah, as well as working on the first and second Rebirth of Mothra films. Aside from my older Showa VHS tapes, I also own the TriStar release tapes of most of the Heisei films, and man, did these blow me away. I remember in particular when I first saw the close-up shot of the Biollante puppet as a child, and my jaw sunk to the floor. I mean, this is some Little Shop of Horrors meets Lake Placid type shit. I'm all in. I didn't grow up in the best environment, and Godzilla was always there to distract me. Whenever the world turned sour, I was able to watch these films and escape the harsh realities of life, totally captivated by the man in the rubber suit and cityscapes that lay before me. For me, like I've mentioned earlier, these movies were a form of art, and I was appreciating every bit of it. It was these moments that stuck with me as a child and cemented my love for this series. Whenever it felt empty, I would watch these goofy movies and be reminded of the passion that's there. The dedication and will of other cultures, combined with the energies and crew involved, made for some of the best films I could have ever asked for growing up. Without them, I wouldn't have ventured out of state to places such as G-Fest and met some of my lifelong friends. These are films that I hold near and dear to my heart, and they opened the gateway to genres of films that I have since grown to love, such as the golden age of horror and many, many more. They taught me deep empathy and the catastrophic nature of nuclear warfare. The only other fictional piece of media to even remotely hit me as hard as the 1954 film Gojira would be something along the lines of Akira. There's so much more that I could touch on in a video like this that I could stretch it on for hours. I just wanted to share my love of the series with you and the world and provide some further insight to the creature features you know and love. I can mention the fact that the Big G has his own star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, or that he is an official citizen of Japan, being an official resident in Shinjuku. I could talk about Godzilla's influence on the music industry, such as Eminem's song simply titled Godzilla, garnering a hefty 300 million views, or that super crazy song Come With Me by Puff Daddy. I could go deeper on the massive effect the Godzilla franchise has had on the toy industry, or mention this cameo and that cameo, but I think what I'm getting at was summed up best by Yuji Shinoda of the Godzilla Prediction Network.
But then why? Why does he keep protecting us?
Maybe because Godzilla is inside each one of us.
Thank you everyone so much for viewing this video. It was my first time trying something like this, and I would love to continue to grow and get better at it. Be sure to let me know what you thought in the comments section below, and what does Godzilla mean to you guys? If you would like to see more content from me, you could always check out my Instagram page, which I'll be linking in the description below. There you will find HD photos of anything that I can grab in this room, edited photos, portrait photos, funny photos. If you want to support me and see more videos like this in the future, all you need to do is hit that like button and subscribe to make future videos like this possible. I can't thank you guys enough, and I'll be seeing you next time. Maybe I'll finally talk about vintage.